Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to the Accelerating Research Translation or ART Question and Answer webinar. My name is Nina Maung-Gaona. I'm one of the ART program directors, and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm also a program director for the Experiential Learning for Emerging and Novel Technologies program. I am very pleased to introduce you to my colleagues at the NSF, starting with Daniel Goetzel, who is a program director in ART, as well as on the Regional Innovation Engines program. Jesus Soriano, who is a program director in ART, as well as in the Partnerships for Innovations program. And Pradeep Fulay, the lead program director for ART, as well as on the Convergence Accelerator program. I'd also like to acknowledge our colleagues Angela Drum and Hamad Aslam, who are helping us today in the background, and also introduce you to Thyaga Nandagopal, the Division Director of Innovation Technology Ecosystems, and Erwin Gianchandani, the Assistant Director for the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships at the TIP Directorate. So we're going to start today's session with Pradeep Fulay briefly recapping some key information about the ART program. And then we're going to segue into the question and answers. Please feel free to use the question and answer panel at any time to start submitting your questions. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Pradeep Fulay.
Thank you, Nina. Let's go to the next slide. I want to thank all of you for joining this webinar. I want to also remind you that the webinar we had in February, on 21st of February, that recording is available. Please go through it because we are just going to do a quick overview today and kind of go through some of the questions and answers and try to answer any questions you have as best as we can. And if you still have questions, then you can definitely contact us on email using the alias art@nsf.gov. So what we want to do today is really take you through the goals and vision of the ART program. Again, very briefly, some of the key dates. And then most importantly, we are also going to be posting office hours starting next week and the week after. There will be multiple office hours, and there will be information that will be posted as to how you can sign up for office hours, in which you will get a chance to connect with me, Nina, Dan, and Jesus, and many of our people on our team. So let's go to the next view graph. So this is the working group. All the people who are listed here, they are across the NSF, all the different directorates, and I'm very grateful to all of them for being part of developing this very exciting initiative called ART. Please do not call it ART, just call it ART. That's the acronym we have developed for this one. So let's go to the next one here. So I'm going to hand this, can we go to the next one? Perfect. So we are celebrating a very special day, and we are very fortunate that we are holding this today. And with that, I'm actually going to hand this over to Dr. Erwin Gianchandani, who is the Assistant Director, AD, for the newly established TIP Directorate. And Erwin, we are so pleased to have you on this very auspicious day for the TIP Directorate, you, Thyaga, as well as Chetan Baru, who is the Senior Advisor. So Erwin, please take it over.
Well, thanks very much, Pradeep and Nina and the rest of the team and everyone who's made this webinar possible today. And my thanks to all of you who are taking time out from your busy schedules for joining us today as well. So Pradeep noted that it's a special day that we're doing this webinar. Sometimes these things just happen by coincidence, the scheduling, and this is one of those circumstances. So as some of you may note from this slide, if you take a quick look at this slide, this is the one-year anniversary of the establishment of the TIP Directorate. So in many ways, the birthday for the Directorate. The Directorate was established on March 16th of last year when the director of the foundation, our boss, Sethuraman Panchanathan, when Dr. Panch unveiled the Directorate at South by Southwest a year ago today. And so we're really thrilled to not only be able to talk about the ART program in this webinar, and I promise you we'll get to the substance of ART in just a second, but also just reflecting back on the year that has been and even a little bit of work that happened prior to March 16th and the run-up to the establishment establishment of the directorate, you can see a myriad efforts in terms of new programs, new activities, new investments that the TIP Directorate has launched, all of which is thanks in large part to the wonderful collaboration that we've had with the administration and with Congress as well. Bipartisan support for the notion of a TIP Directorate, bipartisan support for being able to accelerate technological development, technological translation, and really workforce development as well, as we think about engaging the full breadth and diversity of talent that exists all across the country. And so I won't go through the specifics on this slide, but I will say just a moment of congratulations to the entire TIP team. We have a number of folks on this call, but there are many, many folks who are not on this call as well, who are instrumental in all of the bullets, all of the dots, all of the words that you see on this slide. And also congratulations to the community writ large for your support and your engagement. These programs only have impact through your engagement and through your willingness to roll up sleeves and really deliver on the vision that we have articulated for several of these efforts as well. So it's a great day, and it's I think a really great day to hold this webinar. So with that, we'll transition to the next slide. Just wanted to take a couple of slides here to talk a bit about the goals and how those goals translate to a vision for the ART program in particular, as Pradeep hinted at. So first of all, in terms of the goals, I'll just stress that our perspective here is really about trying to build capacity and infrastructural support for translational research at institutions of higher education all across the country. And we want to do that in a way that's not only going to be able to focus on capacity building for the research, but also thinking about the students, the talent whom we want to enable as well. How do we enable students to really start to think about translational research? How do we get them engaged in it? How do we get them really thinking about it for their long-term career prospects so that it can benefit them across a range of career options, regardless of what sector or what role or what position they may end up in. And at the end of the day, this is something that we are really embarking on because we see the value of translational research across all of the scientific disciplines, the science and engineering disciplines that have traditionally been supported by NSF. And I'll just stress here, I think, a really important point, that this program in many ways is directly aligned with the CHIPS and Science Act that was passed in August of last year, that calls out the role for TIPS to enable capacity building and infrastructural support for translational research. It's something, as a matter of fact, that many of you in the community have long encouraged that there be such support. And so in many ways, kudos to you all as well for encouraging that. And hopefully you'll see that we are trying to listen, or at least trying to do our best to listen in some respects around that. So if we go to the next slide. Thinking about those goals, one thing that I want to emphasize, we use the phrase translational research quite a bit. I think it's really important for us to consider the definition of translational research and the definition of tech transfer. Oftentimes, that tends to be focused on commercialization, new startups and small businesses and so forth. And I think one of the important messages that we want to communicate in this webinar, communicate about this funding opportunity, is that we're trying to take intentionally a relatively broad definition to translational research. This is about taking discoveries from the lab or similar settings and moving them into practical applications that can be deployed at scale. And so, yes, commercialization is certainly a very valid pathway for being able to do that, but you can imagine other pathways as well that lend themselves to impacts on society, impacts on the economy as well. You could imagine, for example, social entrepreneurship. You could imagine pathways where education research can be realized in education settings, informal or formal, and so forth. And so I think it's really important for us, if you look at the right-hand side of this slide and the blue text on the bottom right, we are trying to adopt an expansive definition of tech transfer for this program, one that specifically speaks to the various forms of tech transfer to include some of the examples that I just talked about as well. So if we go to the next slide. I'll just stress one more point about this program. Success for us with respect to art is really the two bullets that are bolded on this slide. How do we expand translational research at institutions of higher education across the country? How do we do that in a way that allows us to really, again, meet people where they are and really create that robust institutional capacity so that anyone, anywhere can engage in the translational research that's going to be able to help NSF-funded research really find its way to impact in the long run. And I think the second piece of this is beyond the institutional support. It's about trying to create a cohort of individuals, and we call them art ambassadors, called out in the funding opportunity, who are within and across those institutions. Folks who are researchers and practitioners who can, in some sense, lend through their experiences in the art program, lend themselves to diverse career options, whether it be in academia or industry or elsewhere, but they can also become advocates for not just fundamental research, but also translational research, and really create the kind of network effects that I think we hope to be able to see through a program like this. So it's, yes, about the institutions of higher education, but it's every bit as much about the people as well, whom we're trying to train and support through this type of an endeavor as well. So I hope that gives you a sense for the goals, the vision, and along the way, how we're trying to intentionally broaden the definition a little bit when it comes to translational research and tech transfer. And with that, I'll pause and hand things back over to Pradeep. But as I do want to just take one moment to acknowledge all of the program officers and others who are on this call. I'll actually start with Thyaga as the Division Director for ITE, Innovation Tech Ecosystems within the TIP Directorate, which is home to the art program, but then also the other program officers whom you see on the screen and beyond. You saw them on the slide that Pradeep had a few minutes ago. This program is made possible by their vision and their leadership. And so my thanks and gratitude to them for getting us to this point. So with that, Pradeep, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Erwin. Erwin, I also want to take this opportunity to thank you, Gracie, Thyaga, Chaitan, and our director, Dr. Pantanathan, for being with us and really not just being with us, but really actively engaging the entire community on this very exciting program. So let's go to the next view graph, please. So we are going to go through some of the overview that we have already done. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with these slides. You can always go back to the previous recording, as well as this one is also being recorded. So what is our target audience here in terms of the art program? Who are the art beneficiaries? We know that there are multiple institutes of higher education that have a high level of fundamental research activity, but relatively speaking, they have a low level of translational activity. So we want to really have art program as a platform to really challenge these institutions to really step up and boost the level of translational activities in the entire institution. So that is what is the main purpose of this accelerating research translation or the art program. So these are these projects, these areas that we cover are almost any area that is funded through the National Science Foundation. So that is clearly the purpose of the art program. One of the things I'll try to also clarify is to what does high translation and what does high fundamental research or what does low translation mean? We are asking the institutions to define this because every institution is different. Their geographical setting is different. And just there is something very unique about every institute of higher education. So we don't have a one call or one thing fits all kind of approach. So we are asking you to determine whether you consider the institute to be one that would be high research and low translational research activity. Let's go to the next one. So another thing, again, this is just kind of showing you that there are some institutions which have high translation as well as high overall volume of research. Those institutions can also participate very much. We want you on board as a mentor institution. You can be working with institutions that have high level of activity, but relatively low level of translational outcomes. So this is simply to highlight that all institutions can really be participating in the art program as well as the Art Ambassador Network. Let's go to the next one. So again, Erwin has already talked about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this other than to point out that we are really trying to look at how can the entire institution really build the capacity and infrastructure that is required for translational activities. We also expect very much that we will have an art ambassador network within the institute, as well as these institutions will collaborate, and there will be a nationwide network in which people will learn from each other as to what does it take to really scale the level of translational activities at speed. So those are the key things that we are doing in terms of the outcomes from the art projects that will get funded. Let's go to the next one. So funding information, again, we are looking at projects that would be awarded about up to $6 million per award. The projects will be up to 4 years in duration. That is our expectation. We are expecting about 10 awards for this round, and we can have, each institution can have only one award for the entire lifetime. So once you get it, you will not be eligible because you are already part of their Art Ambassadors network, I should say. Let's go to the next one. So in terms of the key dates that are already in the solicitation, and anything that we present here, and if there is any kind of inconsistency between this and the solicitation will always take precedence. So that is what is the guiding document. As I mentioned earlier, the deadline is May 9th of 2023, and then we would be announcing office hours. So please look at our website or web page for the art program for the weeks of March 20th and 27th. There will be a number of office hours that will be announced, and please join in. That is your opportunity to meet with me, Nina, Daniel, Jesus, Thyaga, and multiple other people, and we'll make ourselves available multiple times to answer any questions that you have. So, and please remember that one proposal per Institute of Higher Education, and collaborative proposals, do not use the collaborative proposal mechanism. That doesn't mean you cannot collaborate, but just don't use the collaborative proposal mechanism at NSF to submit a proposal to the art program. Let's go to the next one. So now we are going to transition to really what I would call as not just frequently asked questions, but some more frequently asked questions. And I'm going to ask Nina to take over from here, Nina. So it's all yours. Let's try to answer as many questions as we can.
Yep, sure thing. Yes, these are the more frequently asked questions coming into our inbox. We're going to start with those, and then we're going to transition to the questions that are coming in through the Q&A panel. So next slide, please. Okay, so an eligibility related question. The solicitation states that the target IHEs, or institutions of higher education for art, are those with a high level of fundamental research output, but a relatively low level of involvement in translational research. Could you provide more information about the metrics to determine fundamental research output and the metrics for translational research? And that is a very common question we're getting. So Pradeep, will you take that?
Yeah, so Nina, thanks. And I tried to, kind of refer to this earlier on. So we are going to leave it up to the Institute of Higher Education that is applying for this program. So a couple of indicators that come to my mind in terms of, what would define as high level of fundamental research. There could be a number of metrics. One of them could be the total research expenditures, the annual research expenditures, not just in the last 1 or 2 years, but for past several years. That could be one metric. The number of publications, the number of PhDs you name it, and there may be other metric that the institute or of higher education would consider as not only fundamental research, but also scholarly output. So in some cases, research scholarly activities may or may not result in publications. That is precisely why we don't want to tell you as to what we think is a high level of fundamental research, scholarly activities output. So that's point number one. When it comes to translational research, again, there could be a number of metrics. Some of them could be potentially quantifiable, some of them may not be. So number of things that could be quantified could be potential startups that have come out of the companies. There could be revenue that's associated with the royalties, the number of invention disclosures, the number of patents that are issued. But again, I want to caution you that this is up to the institute really to figure out what they consider as low level of translational research activities. And some of them may not result in any patent. As Dr. Gianchandani mentioned, in our program, we are looking translational activities in a very broad sense. So that includes social entrepreneurship, that includes societal impact. I don't think I can emphasize this enough, that this is not simply about tech transfer. It is way beyond that. So Nina, I think that probably answers the questions you're asking.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. Hamad, next slide, please. Okay, another eligibility related question. Our Institute of Higher Education overall has a high level of fundamental research across many disciplines. We also have a robust translational system in one or two disciplines, but the level of translational activity is significantly lower in other disciplines. Are we eligible to apply for the art program? Daniel, will you take that question?
Yeah, this is a good question. Thank you so much for asking it. The simple answer is we're looking at this across an entire institution. So being strong in some areas and weak in other areas, you know, it isn't to kind of strengthen your capacity in those areas where you're weak as an institution. We're thinking about this as kind of a level across the entire institution. And these efforts should be focused on institutional infrastructure building, capacity building to increase your translational research capacity. So don't think about it through the lens of an individual lab or an individual school within the university. Think about it as an institutional level. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Next slide, Hamad. Okay. Our institution has one or more independent nonprofit organizations that are dedicated to handling some or all of the university's activities around research administration, entrepreneurship, innovation, translation, licensing, or commercialization. Is it allowable for one of these entities to submit an art proposal on behalf of the Institution of Higher Education? Jesus, will you take that?
Thank you, Nina. So we encourage strongly that the institution of higher education that submits the art proposal be aligned with previous work funded by NSF. So we're talking about organizations that have already an awarded the organization code, EIN, tax identification number, etc. Obviously, if for the purpose of accomplishing the goals of art, you need to bring additional organizations to the fold, is something that you should consider and do if you think it's appropriate. But I would caution you against, for instance, putting all your eggs in the basket of a organization, even if affiliated with the EIG, that has never received funding from NSF. Because let's say that your proposal was amazing, it gets recommended for award. Well, if at this level of funding, a proposal would have to have an additional level of scrutiny. We're talking about administrative and financial ability to manage federal funds. So for that reason, we strongly recommend that the submitter be the same entity that has this story or history, I would say, of funding with NSF.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jesus. Okay, Hamad, next slide.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe you can go to the question we had for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we have a question that came in through the Q&A panel. This is a question about the IHE can serve on no more than 2 proposals as a subawardee per solicitation. This would mean mentoring institutions could only work with 2 art lead institutions. Is this correct? Thyaga, will you take that?
Yeah, sure. I think by just based on what we have written in the solicitation, that is the exact right interpretation, that a mentor institution can only act as a mentor for 2 lead institutions on 2 different proposals. That said, we have heard from multiple institutions that this is actually a limiting factor for the program to be more effective. So we are taking that feedback and we are trying to address that. So stay tuned to our mailing list. So sign up to our mailing list and we'll send a message out if we have an update on that.
And Thyaga, while I have you here, can you also kind of refer to number of inquiries that we have received are should the institutions be Carnegie R1, R2, R3, etc. So can you also, in terms of eligibility, can you please also address that question?
I think, Pradeep, you addressed that earlier very clearly, I thought, which is to say, look at your research funding, what is that you're getting, and the output, right? The idea is for this program is to translate the outcomes of the high levels of activity that the institution already has, and help those outcomes to be translated into meaningful impacts. So if you can demonstrate that there is high levels of activity, so high levels of outcomes being produced from the fundamental research, then you can make the case for it. It doesn't matter what your Carnegie classification is at that point.
Great, thank you. So Nina, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this is a submission-related question. We have multiple institutes within a single IHE, each with their own unique entity identifier, or UEI, and we typically submit proposals independently to NSF. Can we each submit our own proposal to the program? Pradeep?
Yeah, so I think I'll just, Nina, I'll just refer back to what Jesus was very articulate. He really pointed this out very well, is the bottom line is our program in terms of proposal submission is not really any different from the submission requirements viewpoint. So just follow what we want you to do is just whatever your institute has been doing in terms of doing business with NSF before, just follow that process. And if you still have any question, please reach out to us. But we ideally, we do not want any institutions where they haven't done business with NSF. And as Jesus pointed out, it just opens up one more layer of scrutiny, one more layer of oversight. And so it's not that it cannot be done, but it just makes things more time consuming, more difficult. So just follow what you have been doing as an institution in the past for limited submissions.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, Hamad, next slide. Okay. Will the initial stirrup need to be identified in the proposal or simply the criteria process for selecting them? Daniel? You're on mute.
Yes, I noticed that now. So what we're looking for is for you to identify the first 2 projects in your proposal and the process that you're going to take to choose how you chose these 2 projects and how you're going to choose future projects. So I think this is important. We're interested in the projects. They're obviously very important, but also the way you think about this, the people who are on the review committee, both within your institution and outside of it, the expertise that they have, the way that you're going to do this to ensure that these are projects that have the potential to drive real societal impact in the near term. And by putting in this capital, it can have a real catalytic impact. All of those things are important and things that we're going to review in the process. So to conclude, please identify your 2 projects and explain the process for how they're identified in the process for projects going forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel.
And Nina,
Okay,
can I quickly add one more thing
Of course.
to what Daniel was saying? The other thing we want to be clear on is there is no expectation that there is any NSF lineage to any of these projects. So you can, and also these projects could be funded from any other source because again, please think about this. We are looking at how the proposal will outline, how the proposal will articulate, how the entire institution can boost its translational capacity. That is the goal of the program. So we want you to present us with opportunities where you think it doesn't matter if they were funded through NSF before or not. So, but those should be the best projects that you can identify as the seed translation to really get things started.
Perfect. Thank you. Hamad, next slide, please. Okay, a partnership related question. Is there a limit to the number of partners that can be on the art proposal? Jesus?
Thank you, Nina. So the answer to this question is in line with what my colleagues have said about the other issues like number of CRPs. I would start by saying, when you design this proposal or this project, I'm not saying when you write it, I'm saying when you design it, think strategically, right? Never get stuck in that thinking of a federal exam. If I write this way, they will give me the money. So think about a project, a whole of institution approach that will yield the capacity building, the education, and the increase of translation projects that you need. So when you put the number of partners or the nature of your partners in this context, then it's up to you to decide. It's not because you bring more partners that you will have more success. It is a narrative about how you're going to build capacity, how you're going to accomplish these training goals with ambassadors, and how the whole thing will result into an increased output on translational research on the long term. And those partners who will help you hopefully accomplish the goal. So I guess the answer is up to you. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, is there another slide, Hamad, or is that it? Okay. Another partnership related question. Can we partner with more than one institution of higher education that has high fundamental research level and a robust translational research ecosystem? Pradeep, will you take that one?
So yeah, thank you. So if there is a need for you to access any kind of research equipment, any kind of maybe prototyping facility, or anything that you see that there is a role that is, or there is something that you really need that would require you to partner with somebody who has both a high fundamental research level as well as a translational system, yes, that is okay. And as Dr. Thyaga Nandagopal mentioned before, that we are also aware that the limitation we have currently in terms of the mentoring institution, that we are saying has to be only one, but we are addressing that right now as to how many institutions a university that has a robust translational ecosystem as well as a high fundamental research system, how many they can partner with the lead institution. That's something we are considering right now. But as far as Nina answered to this one goes, if there is a need that can be demonstrated, there is no issue in terms of partnering with such institutions. But again, the key here, as my colleague Daniel Goetzel has pointed out repeatedly, the key here is the primary beneficiary has to be the lead institution that is proposing. That's absolutely the key. So that, please keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Okay, great. I think those are all of the questions that we prepared in advance, so we can stop screen share. I'm going to turn to the questions that have been coming in through the Q&A panel. Let me start. So a question about PI. Should the VPR serve as the PI to demonstrate the university's commitment to art? So Daniel, Pradeep?
Sure, I'll start and then Pradeep can probably add on.
Okay.
We don't have an answer on who specifically at an institution needs to serve as the PI. You need to have buy-in from your senior leadership across the institution, but we're not going to say that person is the EVPR or the provost or anybody else. I mean, we know that the way translational activities are structured and entrepreneurial activities are structured at institutions are different. So what you need to do is figure out who are the people within those institutions who need to get behind this, who are going to be able to drive this work at an institutional level and not just your individual lab or your school. and get them bought in and show that level of commitment in what you submit.
So Nina, if I can quick.
Oh, I would like to add, forgive me, Pradeep, I totally agree with Daniel. Sometimes it's also tempting to go all the way up. Oh, we're going to bring the provost or et cetera, et cetera. And we have seen sometimes projects that where the PI is so high up that the person has no time for this project. And what we want is the project to succeed. So who is your PI is not a political statement in terms of stronger the better. Is the person who, as Daniel said, could make this project succeed. Sorry, Pradeep, I interrupted you.
No, Jesus, I was just going to, you partially said what I was going to say, which is, remember, I would like to point out that the PI is also the lead art ambassador, right? So the PI, she or he, has to be involved in all the project activities very closely, not from a distance. So I think having that, having that role as a PI, we are, you could have your VPR or associate VPR or associate dean for research, etc. The title doesn't matter. What matters is, would they have the vision? Would they have the capacity in terms of their time and influence within the entire institution to make a difference? Would they be committed to really boosting translational research activities? Do they have the background, the experience to make things happen? So I think those are the things to look at. This is not about what title they hold at the institution. That could be part of it, but not everything.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. There was a question about submission dates, whether there were 2 submission dates in 2023. There are not. There is a submission deadline in May of 2023. And then the next deadline would be in September of 2024. So just wanted to clarify that. The next question is, each IHE will provide data to support that they qualify for this funding. So they'll provide data for showing that they have high fundamental research, low translational research. How can we be confident that the data that we provide qualifies our IHE for this funding? Pradeep?
So again, we would look at so remember, these proposals will be reviewed by a very diverse review panel, as well as within NSF, of course. So it is up to you. And again, we cannot be very prescriptive. We don't want to be intentionally prescriptive about which metric will count and which don't count. I think it's really for you, the proposing institution, to make that case as to what it is. And as I mentioned before, when it comes to overall research level activity, I think clearly overall research expenditures, those sorts of things, number of publications, number of PhDs, and so on, number of interdisciplinary research centers on campus, those are, all good metric, but not everything is quantifiable. Number of things that have societal impact are often not quantifiable. So I think please consider that. And I think the same thing goes, Nina, in terms of the translational activity. There could be, a university could have a lot of patent portfolio, but very little revenue in terms of licensing, or it could be one patent is so influential and generated so much revenue. So it's all, going to depend upon the Institute of Higher Education to make a case as to why they think they would be a good candidate for art program.
Okay, thank you. Okay, question that came in. What is the minimal % effort required for the PI? Jesus, do you want to tackle that one? What is the what? Yeah.
So I believe the solicitation is silent on the number of months. My colleague should correct me if I'm wrong. Again, the beauty of submitting a proposal to NSF is that in most cases we let you decide, right? So it has to make sense. So go back to what Daniel said about who should this person be the most effective leader for such a large program. So that person has to subject itself or commit herself himself or themselves to this project. So it's up to you to determine and to make a very strong case for it.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, next question. Can a proposal focus more on building translational infrastructure for student training rather than research, or should there be equal focus? Daniel, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I just want to kind of clarify first that the focus of this should not be exclusively on research. It should be on translational capacity, training students for entrepreneurial careers or non-traditional careers. So if you're reading this and the first word you're thinking is research, basic research, that's not the first word. I don't think that's what was being captured in the question, but I just want to reinforce that point that a lot of this is around creating translational capacity so that you are able to rinse and repeat these efforts. We're not specifically just looking for that one project that's going to be the golden ticket, but we're actually looking to help you build this muscle within your institution so that you can go on beyond our funding and be able to continue to scale these efforts that are launched as a part of this effort. So I wouldn't say there's a specific percentage focus on working with entrepreneurial students or doing this or that, but try to build things that have the capacity to last beyond the period of this award and have the opportunity to scale as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
May I add something?
Sure.
So it is typical in a project that has a research component, whether it's a research and development or translational research, that obviously in the reality of an academic lab, a principal investigator needs to bring graduate students and postdocs. And many of them seek a fundamental research activity. You need to keep in mind that what we're trying to do here, contrary to other fundamental research programs at NSF, is not to just get PhDs, is to create this translational research training. Because the outputs, the career paths for these younger folks would be become an entrepreneur or become, have better chances in industry. Industry, for instance, have a hard time when they hire people. They get an academic young person and they need to retrain them, right? So this type of project would give more chances to compete to the graduate students or postdoc to go into industry, or maybe to become a different type of academic innovator. Folks who can think both fundamentally and on translational research basis.
Thank you. Okay, a question, another question is about the applicability of the translational expertise across different scientific disciplines. So are there any explicit constraints to art-supported capacity building for translation activity when it comes to translation of research traditionally supported by like the NIH, for example, rather than the NSF? Pradeep, will you take that one?
Yeah, sure. So again, we have said in the solicitation that almost any area that is funded through the National Science Foundation is, I think, fair game. That's what we have said. Having said that, we also want to point out that if there are some areas that would require clinical trials, things that are clearly within the domains of agencies like the National Institutes of Health, that is something to be, we'll have to think very hard if we want to go in that direction. At the same time, any areas that might be related to, for example, biomedical engineering, that is clearly supported within the National Science Foundation through the Engineering Directorate. So if you look at your portfolio as a whole, and if you think that this will be a much better fit, much better aligned with, for example, some of the CTSI, the clinical translational science institutes that are funded through NIH, then I think that's the direction you would want to go. But in terms of the areas, and again, I want to emphasize this earlier on what Dr. Gianchandani said, we want to see social sciences. We want to see other forms of sciences. We are not confined only to engineering and physics and chemistry and manufacturing and those sorts of areas. So again, think about the institute as a whole. What does it take to bring translational activities to be seen as a natural organic outcome that is going to build upon the foundational research that has already been funded?
Okay, thank you. Okay, a question about social entrepreneurship. The question is, I keep hearing about social entrepreneurship, but I'm not sure what it really means. Can you provide some examples of social entrepreneurship? How is it different than broader impacts? Daniel, do you want to try that?
It's a good question because I think the field as a whole is struggling with this because people call social entrepreneurship a lot of different things. When I previously worked at a university, we had something called the Social Innovation Lab. And what we did is we worked with ventures. Some of them were for-profits, some of them were nonprofits. Half of them were from the community, half of them were out of our academic institution, but they were all working on problems that were direct needs within that community. So, it could be developing new systems to approach, water technology challenges that are in that community. It could be training programs for teachers, mental health. These were some of the things that we saw come through the program. This is far from the full extent of what the definition of social entrepreneurship might be, but I think the key distinction, at least in my mind, and I welcome others' perspectives on this, is just because it has the impact to improve society does not make it social entrepreneurship. Just because it's a biotech drug that might cure cancer, that in and of itself is not social entrepreneurship. And we think about it in terms of how is the community involved in the creation of these technologies? How are they involved in the testing of it? And how is it solving a direct need and pain point that's felt by the community? So I'm sure others on this call will say that's the wrong definition or they're different with us. But I think the point we're trying to get at is we want to have an expansive definition of how we define pathways into entrepreneurship. And that's what we're aiming for with our broad call.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. And it's about the Art Ambassadors Network. What would qualify as a strong network of art ambassadors? Is there a number, a quality of the ambassadors, the support they're willing to provide, et cetera? Do you expect eventually that multiple funded art projects will begin to share ambassadors? So Pradeep, can you talk a little bit about the ambassadors?
Sure. So I think I'll just take the last part of the question that you asked. We definitely want the vision for art is really for all the art body institutions over many years to really connect with each other, learn from each other. So if there are initially, for example, Nina, if there are 10 institutes that end up getting the funding through this program, we want them to learn from each other, right? There would be an art bodies meeting. That would be one opportunity for them to connect with each other and learn from each other as to what are some of the things that are working from them, that are not working from them. When it comes to, so that is the Art Ambassador Network throughout all the different geographies across the United States. That's one thing. Secondly, when it comes to the Institute of Higher Education itself, we want to see art ambassadors being engaged at every level. What does that mean? What it means is we want postdoctoral researchers to be involved, and they are part of the Art Ambassadors Network. We want undergraduate students, we want graduate students, we want faculty to be involved in the Art Ambassadors activities or roles. And then we definitely want the senior administration, some of them, not all of them, some of them playing a key role in promoting translational activities on their campus. And then, Nina, there could be people that are in the outside organizations too. There could be people that are angel investors, VCs, community leaders, community engagement organizations, economic development organizations. As long as they are willing to put their time in and provide some very unique value to that network, all of them, we want to see engagement at every level. We want to see that in the Art Ambassador Network within the institutes, and then they interconnect across with each other. That's the vision.
Can I just add one more point to that one? So I used to work in a tech transfer office. I know, entrepreneurial capacity exists in all different places within academic institutions, but I'm going to just actually take this from like the outside perspective, as an investor, an industry partner. A lot of times, and I'm sure everyone on this call has heard this, said, oh, I'd be interested in working with that university. They do some really interesting research, but I don't know who to work with over there. I have no idea what the right entry point is, or who are the people who actually can help drive this. And they're like, I don't want to just go to a website. Actually, interestingly, this is my longer term vision. The Ambassador Network could act as a front door for industry in certain ways, trying to think about who are the people who are well connected with that within that institution, who are working on really exciting projects, and actually have the ability to move things around, the Art Ambassador Network could be a really interesting front door to those communities as well. So I think there's a lot of network effects within it, but I also think there's a value in how we connect with the innovation community writ large by building this ambassador network in the right way.
Yeah, incredibly exciting, the Art Ambassadors Network. Okay.
I think Jesus has a comment. Nina, Jesus has a comment.
Yes, if I may. We know it's difficult to develop such a large program from scratch, but I think in terms of the program-specific reporting requirements in page 12, and then think as well that in page 14, when we speak about, so there's review criteria, which are specific to the solicitation, and then reporting requirements in page 14. And there we say that NSF may change a little bit things, right? And you need to keep in mind that this is a cooperative agreement where NSF is a partner, an active participant. So obviously we want you to provide a vision as structured as possible of the project, but as Pradeep and Daniel were indicating, things will be evolving and the program directors will have a say on how the program moves on the long term and how different art projects interact with each other. So it's impossible for you to have all the answers, but make sure that you provide this large vision of how the art ambassadors will support the goals that NSF is trying to achieve.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. A question about which would be more responsive to the solicitation? A translational infrastructure focused on one or two thematic areas, or a broad technology agnostic infrastructure capable of supporting a wide diversity of projects at a university? So, Daniel, would you like to take that?
Pradeep, why don't you start and then I'll come in.
Yeah. So I think, again, we look at, so number one, the thing to remember is that in terms of if they're asking about seed translational research projects, there's a limit there, right? We don't want 10 seed translational projects to be proposed as part of the activity to begin with, right? So that number is limited. What areas they come from, that is again up to the Institute of Higher Education, right? Now, in terms of the balance, right? So we want to see both the seed translational research project type of activities, but as Daniel mentioned before, what else is going to happen that is going to really help boost the capacity for that institution across the board, right? So it's not just about, how do one or two projects look like every year, but it's really what are your limitations? If you look at it, we have said before that the assumption is that the overall research activity is high, but the translational outputs are low. So what does it take? What are some of the barriers? What are the challenges? And how will this art program help your institution, help the leadership really use this program as a platform to really overcome those barriers, to really boost translational activities, and not only boost it while the funding is on, but what are your plans to really sustain it down the road? So, that is, I think, very, very key. So this is really a capacity building initiative. This is not meant to fund one or two seed projects or, here and there. That is not the goal that is not the big picture, the big vision for this program. The idea is that in 4 more years, the institution should be in a much better position in terms of demonstrating that they have that capacity that did not exist when the program started. And that's why, Nina, if I may add, this partnership with a institution that already has a robust capacity for translation and a high volume of research, that partnership, we have said, is strongly encouraged, is not required. The reason for that is we also don't want proposing lead institutions to start saying, oh, we don't have a tech transfer office, so we are just going to build a tech transfer office. That may happen down the road, but the real purpose is to really partner with this institute, which will be your mentoring institute, and you use their expertise, use their knowledge, use their resources. They will have a budget. So it's not charity on their part. Really, you're working with them as a true partner, and then you can slowly begin to build your own capacity as the program kind of unfolds. Daniel, I don't know if you or Jesus, if you guys have anything to add.
I'm going to add something on that last point, and this is going to kind of be speaking to maybe a smaller subset of the population of the call, but to those of you who are at high-performing institutions, the institutions that might be sub-awardees, really think intentionally about how you drive these partnerships with the lead organizations. Think about the value that you can add. Think about their needs as an institution and the gaps that you can fill. Do not just give them kind of, here's a package in a box, go take it and pay us X amount of money for it. This is meant to be a mentorship relationship, a close relationship, not you trying to figure out a new revenue stream to sell something to another institution that might be less sophisticated in this area. So I don't think that's the intention of what anyone on this call is going to do, but I think it's important about how we talk about these partnerships and how we're going to evaluate these partnerships in the process.
Very good, thank you. Okay, another question. NSF encourages that the partner institutions be in the same region as the lead institution. How important is this? Daniel, would you like to take this?
We encourage it, but we want you to find the best partner, whoever that might be. If that person is in your region and there's an opportunity to develop regional synergies, as you might know from our NSF Engines programs, from other programs that are coming aboard at NSF, we are excited about regional ecosystem building and creating synergies in communities and trying to think about this through a place-based lens. But we ultimately want you to choose the best partner, wherever that partner might be. It might be because you have a previous working relationship with them. It might be that you both are strong in a certain topic area. Make the case about how you choose that partner, and then we'll believe it. But we do encourage you to explore those who are already in your backyard, because we don't want institutions to exist in silos in their communities.
Perfect. Very clear. Thank you. Okay. Can you address the use of not using funding for infrastructure improvements? So the NSF ART grant stipulates that no more than $50,000 can be spent per year on equipment and instrumentation. Does this include purchases that are made through the required seed grant offerings? So Pradeep, do you want to take that question about that limitation on funds towards infrastructure and equipment?
Correct. So again, I will direct you to the precise language in the solicitation, but I can just try to explain the rationale or the spirit of what we are trying to do here. What we are trying to do, Nina, here is, for example, if a project is going to propose purchase of a $1 million most advanced, or maybe $2 million advanced electron microscope, or some such major piece of equipment, that is not within the scope or the spirit of the ART program. That is not within the spirit of the program. So we are not looking for institutes to use this as an opportunity to do what the major research instrument, MRI, the major research instrumentation program is meant for, right? So please, or mid-scale infrastructure project, there are many other programs that NSF in which you can apply for. So that is the idea, and we are also not very excited, or we don't want institutes to use this to actually build a new building or office space. That is again not within the spirit of the ART program. That's why we have those. But at the same time, if somebody reads rapid prototyping capability, or they need something which is they can either lease or use or access it somehow, that's the purpose of allowing, or you need something add-on specialized equipment or a sensor or what have you. I think that is the idea why we have a cap on how much money can be spent on purchase of new equipment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think we only have time for one more question. I'm going to send it over to you, Jesus. If the institution has not received NSF funding in the past, what challenges will that cause for applying to ART?
If the institution has never ever received funding, you should look into our website. It's in the area of Budget, Finance, and Administration, there are guidelines there for pre-awardees or prospective awardees. And there's a whole list of documents that will be provided upon recommendation by the program officer. So after recommendation by a program officer of an award or a proposal for award, there are many steps that take place. Particularly in big awards like these, it is not a program officer making decisions. So there's a team, there's leadership, etc. Right? So everybody's encouraged to submit. Make sure that you look at these guidelines for prospective awardees, because if you're going to submit, start preparing your paperwork already, just to make sure that by the moment, hopefully your proposal is going to be recommended for award by the program director. Since there will be other steps behind that, you are ready with your package. And I can tell you that it's common. I mean, in other programs where I work, we have this case, and folks can be perfectly successful.
Yes,
you just
perfect.
need to plan ahead.
The message of planning ahead and starting early is really important. So yeah, thank you. All right. Well, I think this concludes our ART Q&A webinar. On behalf of the entire ART team here, we would like to thank you for joining today. We hope you found the information that we provided to be very helpful. We really did get to a lot of the questions. I did drop into the chat registration for the office hours, which are starting next Monday. So please do go ahead and register for one of those sessions. We have them capped at 50 per session, and that's because we are looking to have smaller group discussions at those office hours. You have a time to sort of interact during those office hours. So we look forward to seeing you either at the office hours, or please continue to use the art@nsf.gov to send your questions, where we do get quite a number of emails on a daily basis, and we get to them as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, thank you again so much for joining today, and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.